It was a journey with a purpose to build a strong business community through healthy interaction between corporate leaders and management gurus. This has helped many companies to surge ahead with sound professional management practices.
A growing economy often ushers in new trends in the market. Regular seminars and interactive workshops are conducted by KMA to keep up with the ever-changing market requirements.
A 2-day annual management convention is conducted during the first quarter of every year, which is attended by over 1,000 delegates from all across Kerala. Eminent speakers of national and international repute lead this prestigious event.
KMA's many successful initiatives are very popular among its members. Some such initiatives are
Evening lectures by eminent people,
CEO Conclave,
Management Students Forum,
Young Managers Forum,
sector-specific seminars.
Women Managers Forum.
KMA is active in the social media networking sites and also has a comprehensive website www.kma.org.in.
KMA is managed by a managing committee comprising of prominent industry and corporate heads and functions at its own premises at Panambali Nagar, Cochin, which also houses spacious conference halls, classrooms and a library.
Based on their yearly performance, corporate companies are awarded KMA's Excellence Awards in 5 different categories, which promote healthy competition for excellence among members.
Membership. A membership in KMA offers opportunities to interact with the top management leaders in Kerala to share knowledge and skills, thereby commanding respect and credibility to your organization. Corporate membership is open to business houses, government enterprises, and educational institutions, etc.
Any individual who meets the norms set by KMA can enroll as life members on payment of the fees as a lump sum and half the fee for a senior citizen.
For more details, please contact Executive Director.
Good evening and warm welcome to all the invited guests, KMA leaders and members. A very happy new year to each one of you. Let us begin this 21st edition of the KMA LeaderTalks lecture series with a minute silence and pray to Almighty that we all remain safe and healthy and all of us will overcome these challenging times. Continue to be seated wherever you are and close your eyes for a minute. Thank you and good evening once again to our guest of the evening, Mr. Matthew Chacko, co-founder, director and CEO of Precision Informatics India Limited, Chennai, past president and program committee chair, Mr. S.R. Nair, the one past president present here, Mr. A.K. Nair, senior vice president, Ms. Nirmala Lilly, joint secretary, Algiers Khalid, other managing committee members including Mr. Hari Kumar and others whom I cannot see on screen, members of KMA and other LMAs, students and invited guests. We've been hearing about the various waves of the pandemic and we are supposedly going through the third wave now, and it looks like a real super spread of the virus now. While half of the offices and our associates are either affected or quarantined in their own spaces, KMA is trying to keep us all connected and engaged through these kind of sessions to remain positive and in sync with the changes that are happening. We have a very topical subject for the session today. While we are hearing a lot about the disruptions, innovations, and the new normals being spoken about during these COVID times in almost all domains of business, the topic for the day says, creating a sustainable corporate culture, a new paradigm. Sustainability has become the new buzzword in these change situations. The work culture and the way each of the stakeholders of any business behave and react have undergone a sea change and an evolution. And with COVID changing the equations drastically and pragmatically, new paradigms have come to the fore in creating a sustainable corporate culture. Today, we have a seasoned leader with 3.5 decades of corporate leadership experience, an expert in creating a conducive work environment for his employees to make them the most productive. Well, this is how KMA has been pulling on in these troubled times to stay relevant and provide you all with meaningful deliberations and events of utility. In spite of all the uncertainties and turmoil of the pandemic, KMA has been continuously bringing to you very many events of purpose on a regular basis. StartCon discussion series presenting successful startup companies, in fact, featuring 24 such individuals who have made it or who are making it big with their startup ideas. Very meaningful and focused women managers forum activities at least once a month, and many management education programs we were trying to serve suiting everyone's palate. We even conducted a week-long Management Week celebrations during February, a Management Students Convention with over 800 B School students participating, 3 memorial lectures with exceptional speakers, organized a virtual run, the KMA Run, with nearly 1,000 participants from across the country, propagating our annual theme of responsible management, and also conducted one digital summit in hybrid format. All 3 memorial lectures of KMA, that is the Professor M.V. Paili Memorial, Professor K.P. Chandy Memorial, and Sri M.K.K. Nair Memorial lectures were conducted with some of the finest speakers addressing our delegates. In addition to this, we have started a series of workshops for the MSME sector with an opening meet that was inaugurated by the State Industries Minister, Mr. P. Rajiv himself, and continuing with specific workshops enlightening the participants on various schemes, benefits, and offers available with central, state, and banking institutions. We also initiated a new event titled Rendezvous with the CEO, a program organized by the KMA CEO Forum, which features an interactive session with CEOs of national repute who have made significant and remarkable achievements against all odds to share their success stories with our members. We've had 2 of such events till now with Mr. Kishore Rangta, the Chairman and Managing Director of FACT Limited, and Mr. Dilip Uman, CEO of ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel, coming in to address our delegates. The leadership seminar done jointly with Rotary International was conducted in a hybrid format with over 500 participants, and we had some of the finest speakers, including the premier Indian scientist, Padma Vibhushan Dr. R.M. Mashelkar, addressing the delegates. Last month, we had the annual CSR Conclave 2021, again in hybrid format, with more than 100 delegates and KMA CSR award winners present physically, while the event had State Industries Minister and some of the renowned corporate chieftains explaining the effective ways of doing CSR projects. And KMA, in fact, felicitated in person the Keralite woman of substance in social service, Sister Lucy Kurian, the founder and director of Maher Foundation, for winning the coveted Jamalal Bajaj Award for Social Service. Well, coming to today's LeaderTalks sessions, a program committee headed by past president and corporate mentor, Mr. S.R. Nair, and our team have been conceiving regular programs under the banner of KMA LeaderTalks. We have presented a series of such lectures of eminent personalities, and this is the 21st of the LeaderTalks lecture series that we are having in this KMA year. All these sessions were carefully selected with renowned speakers from the industry and academia, sharing their domain knowledge and their invaluable experience with our audience. Speakers were from diverse sectors and topics were topical and timely. And today we have yet another session with contemporary relevance and great level of interest to all of us present here. Corporate sustainability is an approach aiming to create long-term stakeholder value through the implementation of business strategies that focus on the ethical, social, environmental, cultural, and economic dimensions of doing business. In simple terms, sustainability stands for meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We have Mr. Matthew Chacko, co-founder, director, and CEO, Precision Informatic Limited, Chennai, to address us on this much relevant topic, creating a sustainable corporate culture, a new paradigm. On behalf of the Managing Committee at KMA and all present here, I formally welcome you, Mr. Matthew, to this session of KMA LeaderTalks. I also extend a hearty welcome to all the past presidents of KMA here, members of the Managing Committee and the Executive Committee, the Senior Vice President, Joint Secretary, members of KMA and other LMAs, student members, members of the media, and all invited guests to this session, which is about to begin. So without further ado, let me invite our Program Committee Chair, Mr. S.R. Nair, to formally introduce a speaker and also take us through this session. For those, if you still do not know SR well, he is a senior past president of KMA and is a renowned corporate mentor, business coach, author, blogger, and thinker who turned his focus to academia after a successful stint as an IT entrepreneur for many years. Interestingly, all three in the spotlight now on screen, Mr. Matthew Chacko, Mr. S.R. Nair, and yours truly, have had our nursery steps in the corporate ladder at Hindustan Computers Limited, or the original HCL, long back. Over to SR now to formally introduce our guest leader and to take you through the session, including the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Well spoken, President Madhav. Thank you. Chairman of the session and President of KMA, Madhav Chandran, other dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. I will now introduce Mr. Matthew Chacko to you all and then leave the podium to him to do his presentation, his deliberation, post which we shall be asking him questions. I shall be moderating the same. All of you who are having questions may kindly put the questions in the chat mode. I will identify you by your name and designation and then shoot the question on your behalf. At this point in time, please keep muted. Okay. Let me please introduce Mr. Matthew Chacko. Okay. Mr. Matthew Chacko, an engineering graduate from University of Madras, started his career with Hindustan Computers Limited, HCL, as a customer support engineer way back in 1988 and rose to head the support services for HCL Frontline Limited, a group company. In 1996, with two of his HCL colleagues, he founded Precision Informatics Madras Limited and took the responsibility of corporate strategy, technology initiatives, and services. Precision Informatics is now a leading pan-Indian IT solution provider, dwelling in solutions based on biometric, IoT, infrastructure management, remote management services, and system integration with more than a quarter century of standing in the market. Incidentally, our universal identification that is called the Aadhaar card biometric had been completely done by his organization. Successfully running biometric business is one of the technology initiatives that is driven by him. He is deeply involved in strategizing future initiatives of the company with a clear focus on providing solutions to address business challenges. Matthew also personifies Precision's passionate commitment to customer satisfaction and high quality of its deliverables. The LeaderTalk is based on his experiential learning of more than 3.5 decades as an employee first and as an entrepreneur and employer later. Matthew, all yours. Please proceed with your presentation. Pradeep, please help him to share the screen, please.
Yeah, I will take care of that. Thank you so much. Thank you, President Madhav. Thank you, SR. I mean, as we all call him. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can see a lot of senior members part of this in the esteemed audience. So let me start with a disclaimer. I mean, what I am going to share is something that has been personally experienced. I strongly believe it will resonate with most of you, but there are possible inputs that I would still seek during the course of this discussion or towards the end of the discussion, where I would be happy to understand your experience as well. I mean, this whole thing is just a slide, so you can imagine that we would be talking about what I have gone through, typically packed into one slide. And at the end of the day, I think I believe all of you can have something that is that you can introspect and make use of in the days to come. So with this, let me start. I mean, I will share my slide. So we have, I hope this is visible to everyone. Yeah, so this is, I mean, there are different names that could have been provided to this framework or model that I'm proposing to share. But somehow we landed on this name, Culture Framework. And it essentially takes me through the journey since my childhood, my education, working with HCL, and then subsequently when we started Precision way back in '96. So essentially, I would be talking about the journey with Precision, so how it all started, what has been the experiences that we have gathered, and how it relates to each other. And that's essentially the way I would like to start. So to start with, any organization will have these three fundamental stakeholders, right? So the organization itself, the people who are the critical piece of the organization, and the customers. These are the three primary stakeholders. There is, of course, a fourth one. I will come to that in a while. These three stakeholders' interests are paramount when we start any organization, and this is where most of the learning has come. So let's start with the people. Now, I have been involved in recruiting people when we started the organization, and I have interviewed people who are just out of college, people who have literally studied under the street lights. And for them, it all starts with what is it that I can get? I mean, what is my remuneration? And that's what was important to them. And as we moved, as these people started getting into the organization and got themselves established, the next thing that they looked at was identity and respect. Now, this is the next layer that they wanted to look at. And I mean, let me tell you, organizations lose people not for this reason of remuneration. It is something that is much more. So this was what we noticed as a second aspect that people looked at. The third aspect that they wanted is growth. So this came up as the third objective of theirs. I mean, how can they put their intelligence to use? How can they contribute? Those were the things. So they were interested in how they can grow within the organization. And finally, I think this is where the most important aspect comes. They wanted to know how they could contribute, give it back to the organization that has supported. Now, if you notice, the first three, the remuneration, identity, respect, and growth, is what the organization would do to the employee. Whereas the fourth layer, which is contribution, is what the employee does to the organization. And I think that's where maximum satisfaction has been derived by these people. Now, this is something that I'm sure all of you would resonate with. And this is where they would like to be spending most of their time. So this is what I learned from interacting with various people. And of course, when you interact with senior people much later in the organization, we discuss what is their role, we discuss what are their opportunities to contribute. And of course, remuneration is discussed, but at the end of the day, that is not the most important thing. But the order of the expectation was typically this. So they wanted a fair remuneration, they wanted the identity and respect to be intact, they wanted to be clear about the growth potential that they can have, and finally, how they could contribute back to the organization. So then comes the organization. I think the people is always in the center, and that's why I put them in the center as well, because they are the people who carry the organization to the customer. I think so. It is very important that their objectives are met. So from an organization standpoint, what is your motivation to create this organization? I saw 4 distinct levels here as well. We interacted with several people, and some of them, I would say that the objective of my organization is to generate profits. I want to make money. So this is one layer of inputs that we got from various senior people from across organizations. The second thing that we noticed was we wanted to create opportunities for people. So typically stakeholder relationship was their primary motivating. Now, essentially it is looking like this: what in their opinion is success to them. So there are a set of people who said profits were what is important to us. And there were the next set of people who said stakeholder relationship. We want to contribute to people. We want to make lives better for these people who are part of the organization. So stakeholder obviously means a lot more, but from their objective when the organization was conceived, it was stakeholder relationship that they were looking at. There is another set of people who said, we are interested to be a market leader. We wanted to use our intellectual property, our intelligence, and be a market leader in whichever segment that we want to operate on. And this is, and in fact, if you look at precision, I mean, we wanted to have the freedom to use our intelligence with, and that's, I think that was the motivation for precision to start itself. So that the freedom to leverage your capabilities for the benefit of your customers, that was the motivation for precision. And if you look at this, brand is a big word. I think people like SR can talk more about this, but essentially, I mean, if you look at how the market perceives you, is around these two. So it is basically how you treat your customers, what type of products and services and IP, intellectual property, that you have brought to the table. So this was the third aspect that we could notice. And finally, and I think this came from very few organizations, some of them said that we want to create this organization as a vehicle to contribute back to the society, give it back to the society. I would say Precision never had that at the beginning of our inception, but I did come across few people who said that the very purpose of creating this organization is to have a vehicle that could do more or give more back to the society. Now, as individuals, all of us are, I'm sure, doing our bit. But when it comes to as an organization, there is a lot more that can be done. I think that's the key takeaway here. So how can an organization as a vehicle result in more contribution to the people? I think that became one of the observations that we had. So again, you see there are these 4 layers that we could come across. And then let's do the customer. I think this is a very critical piece here. We obviously have variety of customers that we have interacted with. Some of the customers, I would say most of the customers would obviously discuss with you with an intent to have the least cost. This all depends on the type of offerings that you have. But in typical commodity services that we were earlier, and of course we have moved up the value chain these days, we were interacting with customers who said, okay, if your cost is least, we do business. So that was one of the observations that happened. And then we had another class of customers who were willing to work with you, giving you a bit of premium for the experience that they have gained. Now that's something that they love the interaction with our people. They love the way we handled situations, and experience was something that they valued, and they provided that weight for us to be given the preference over the competition. So that's the third, the second aspect that we noticed with customers. The third aspect is, which was getting more involved in terms of the technology. I think we being a technology company, they wanted to know what capabilities we can bring to the table to solve their problems. So we started interacting with senior people, CXO level people out in the customer's premises. And we had to bring solutions, and that's something that they would resonate with and work with us to bring. And here, thankfully, cost was not the consideration. The solution to their problems was most important. And very few customers we have interacted here where what I call as a differentiating contribution. Now, I would like to give an example here. We still have a microservices customer who is pan-India, and they were doing this micro lending to rural markets, and typically the quantum of funding would be in the few thousands, right? So this company was doing this lending, and they used to take 7 days to complete the process. Now, if they are able to identify somebody who wanted money, they would need 7 days to complete the process to eventually disburse the money. And when we came in with Aadhaar, we were able to give them a solution, give the customer a solution that would make their entire KYC process, literally reducing the whole time to 7 minutes. So 7 days to 7 minutes is what we were able to contribute to them. And imagine the impact it makes to the customer, because this lending is, the velocity of his lending is enhanced. His time that is spent on processing all this loan requirements have reduced, and the automation with Aadhaar integrated. And we have played a significant role in that, so much so that the managing director and CEO of the company has gone on record to say, what used to take 7 days is now 7 minutes now, thanks to Precision. So this is the differentiating contribution where you actually are able to make that type of an impact with customers. Now, I have seen these 3 stakeholders, if you look at, there is a pattern that is emerging. You have this 4 layers, and so let's expand this further. And here I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to bring in a different dimension. It's a metaphor, but it really helps to convey what I have to say. Let's look at sports. Now, sports is something that I'm sure all of us play, and I've been a sportsman. I continue to be a sportsman. And for the sake of ease of understanding, let's take cricket as an example. Now, for a game like cricket to be played, it is very important that fitness is a fundamental requirement. One has to be absolutely fit to be able to participate in this game. The second aspect is there is a need for, so it is not enough to be fit. You have to have a passion. And if you are in a team game, you have to have a teamwork in place. You have to collaborate. You have to work with your team members. So this becomes a second most critical aspect when you talk of sports. The third is you have to be smart. Now, obviously, smartness comes as an underlying thing. You need to have the skills. You need to have the knowledge about the game. You need to have the experience. But what is important is you need to be smart when you are playing a game. You need to win over the opposition in a manner by playing it smart, because the conditions are similar for both the playing 11 in this case. And finally, I think most important here is how do you play the game? I mean, you have to play it fair and square. Now, this is, and I think we have had enough instances in particularly with the game of cricket and instances in other games as well. People have adopted methods which are not fair and ended up on the winning side for that match, but eventually their glory came to naught. So this is what the sports can teach us. Now, why I brought to that is to bring in a critical element to the whole business environment. And that is, okay, let me, before I come to that, I here, who's the customer for sports? And it is actually, if you look at it, it is the spectators, the people who watch the game are the customers for this. And the sponsor is the board of the respective games. And two teams fight with each other to win. And the reason why I brought this is because that gives us to the fourth stakeholder, which is competition. Now, if you have to win over a competition in your day-to-day business deals, I think all four layers are very critical. I think we have to be fit as an organization. We have to have a team of people who are passionate and happy to have his team member grow. We have to be smart in the market. We have to have our feet on street. We have to really outwit the opposition. But most importantly, I think we have to be fair in how we go about winning business. Now, this is what I noticed as a pattern, and what are these four layers all about? So that's where we come to the different dimension, and this is what I think that the next part of what I have to share goes. So let me bring in this layer of quotient. Now, what is this quotient? I mean, you have seen these four layers. We have heard of the emotional quotient. So that is the second layer, how you relate to people. We have heard of intelligence quotient. That is the intellectual layer. So that is the third layer. But two other layers which are equally important is the physical quotient. I don't know, most of you must have heard about this. Higher physical quotient is critical to be able to sustain the above layers. And most importantly, I think the fourth layer is what I call as the spiritual quotient. Now, this you can relate it to a human body, human system. And it is essentially very simple here. It is the body that is at the physical layer, your heart at the emotional layer, your mind at the intelligence layer, and your spirit, soul at the spiritual layer. Now, this is getting into a stage where there are these four layers that have distinct roles to play, distinct ways to interpret rather. So how can this be extended further? So what are the layers then? So the bottommost layer becomes the foundation layer. And this is where, like any infrastructure that you build, any house or homes that you build, the foundation has to be strong to withstand what is going to be put on top. And what is next comes the character layer. Now, the second layer is character. Now, character is a lot more than what we probably have to learn. It is both intent and integrity. Now, what is your intent? I mean, how caring you are, how transparent you are, how open you are, and your integrity which is the result of how people perceive your character, which is your honesty, the fairness, the authenticity. And I think alignment also deserves a mention here. I mean, if you're in an organization or if you're in a country, your alignment, even though you may not agree with the norms, alignment to the norms, alignment to the process actually indicates a strong character. So this became a very, so this layer talks of character. The third layer talks of competence. Now, competence again has two aspects to it. One is the capability that you have, but equally important, if not more important, is the results. Now, what are those? The capability obviously is your skills, knowledge, and experience, but results is what is your reputation? How credible are you in the eyes of others? And what's been your past performance? I think this determines your competence, and together is what, in my opinion, creates trust with organization, with people with whom you interact. So the trust is a function of character and competence, not independently. It has to be together. And I think that's what gives you that ability, that leverage when you when you interact with people and customers, as the case may be. So finally, the fourth layer becomes your purpose. So you have these layers. So you have the foundation layer on which you need to build. You have your character and competence layer with which you build trust. And finally, what are you here for? Which is the purpose layer. And that essentially is at the top. So let's take it further. So what we have seen is the type of interaction that happens at various layers. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So the foundation layer, typically, more than the foundation, I would look at it from a physical layer or the type of transactions that we do. It is typically transactional. I mean, I have a aspect to complete and that's it. So that's the type of interaction that happens at the lowermost layer. And then you get into, when you interact with people, you get into an operational type of interaction. And then here, at the intelligence layer, you start having tactical discussions. And at the spiritual layer or at the highest layer, we have strategic discussion that is happening with various customers. So depending on the type of interaction you're having, you can sort of introspect and see that, yes, this is the layer that which I am operating on, and this can possibly be inputs to you as you move forward. Right. So moving to the next one, how do you evaluate your situation? What are the methods that which I can understand where I am today? So here we can check the quality of assets at the physical layer. Now, what is the quality of assets? Now, the asset could be your physical assets, it could be your financial assets, it could be, I mean, in an IT thing, it could be, what are the assets that you have? So this quality of assets will determine the level or the strength of that particular layer. Quality of relationship determines the level at which you are in the second layer. Quality of interaction determines the level at which you are in the third layer. And finally, quality of service determines your level at the fourth layer. Now, if you look at these four aspects, you can easily determine where you are fitting in today. I mean, you can probably come out with methods by which you could improve on this, or if you're already good at that, great, you can further strengthen it. But I think the quality of assets, relationship, interaction, and service determine the various aspects of your life as a whole. Now, we can expand this further. So quality of assets, you can also look at how credible are you in the market. Quality of relationship, you can check your behavior. Quality of interaction, you can check your reputation in the market. And finally, a quality of service can be determined by the amount of contributions you have made in the world so far. So this is the way one could evaluate where we are on these layers and what is the action that we can take post that. So here comes a slightly different dimension that I have attempted to bring. So, but at the base, if you have an issue at the asset or at the physical layer, I think what needs to be done is discipline. You have to have discipline. If your health is not good, you have a discipline in your diet. You have to have your discipline in doing your workouts. I'm sure there are a lot of newer resolutions that would have made, and most of them would have also probably it's not continuing. But what is important is if you have a quality of assets is not good, I think discipline is very important. If you have issues with relationship, I think dialogue is very important. So behavior is very important here. If you have issues with your interaction, you have to really get into a diagnostic mindset. I mean, just applying your intelligence to see how you could address them. And finally, if you have issues at the top, I think one has to delve deep into understanding where and how we are going about our day-to-day affairs. Now, I have tried to bring in a slightly different dimension here. So that is the yogic principles. Now, yoga is not something to do with religion. It is a lot to do with the spiritual liberalization, if I may call. So at a physical level, the yoga that would help is Hatha Yoga, which talks about your physical aspects, which is your breathing, which is your postures, which is your, I think they call asanas, which you various positions that you have to practice with the breathing control. So that would help you gain that level of discipline. That at the emotional level, it is bhakti. Now, bhakti yoga is all about devotion. It is all about love and passion. And I think what is important here is, how do I solve my relationship issues? I mean, try this. This could really help. The third one is, in case I have challenges in my work, Karma Yoga is something that would help. I mean, Karma Yoga talks about do your work, don't worry about the results. I think that will take care of itself automatically. Do it diligently, do it sincerely, do it with the purpose of good to others. And I think the results will automatically happen. And at the fourth layer, I think this is Jnana Yoga, which is all about answering questions about who are you, what are you, what is this whole thing here in the world that is happening. So this could help in terms of understanding a different perspective to what needs to be looked at that particular layer. And covering everything is Raja Yoga, which is the king of yogas, which would touch all these things in some form or other. So one could look at any of this to address possible challenges at each of these layers. I mean, this is again opinion of mine. And so that brings us to the final aspect. So what should be the culture, or how can you identify based on the current prevailing situation in any organization, what type of culture they have? So that's this. So if you see that, if there is a control culture in an organization, they are probably in the physical layer, and that's where they are probably trying to have this control to work on, to improve on, whatever. So, but control culture is, in my opinion, at that layer. The next culture that one could see is a collaboration culture, where there is a lot of teamwork, there is a lot of discussions, a lot of interactions. So that's the culture that you could see at that level. At the third level is what you would call as a competence culture, where the drive is towards improving one's skill sets. They try to improve their experience on various technologies. Again, I'm taking the IT industry parlance. So competence becomes a very, very, one can see that as a culture that is prevailing in organizations. And I think one of the requirements for organizations would be to have a cultivation culture. I'll come to that again. So cultivation culture is something where you are really happy to see growth. You are happy to contribute. You are happy to see the elevated level of thinking. So this is the culture that I believe would be appropriate as for various organizations. But however, let's expand this. So this is a framework that I've been able to put together. I hope this makes sense to most of you. That, as I said, there could be some experiences that may contradict this, but I'm willing to and happy to hear you out. But let me expand this slightly. Let's see how this can be put to use in some areas. So some of the observations here are, it is important to have equality among all stakeholders. Now, what I mean here is, there are different layers of people, different functions within the organization. Some are powerful, some are not. But it is important to, when you adopt this, have an equality among all stakeholders so that the objective analysis is possible. And this is, again, a very, very important aspect. We all operate at various levels. At times I would be very emotional. At times I'm not in good health. At times I will be very, very magnanimous. So one operates at different levels, and in a collaborative construct, it is important that we all come to a same level. I think there is this book of 6 Thinking Hats, no? That I think that's Edward de Bono's book, if I'm right. So which talks of how one plays different roles. Sometimes you are emotional, sometimes you are angry, sometimes you are, there are various modes of operation. So in this case, when you get to a discussion, it is important to understand that people will come in with different levels. I will be talking about something very, very strategic, and one of my colleagues may come and talk about operational issues, or he may think about the operational aspects. So this is something that needs to be understood. There are positive and negative aspects to this. So if you look at, a physical quotient or an emotional quotient, an intelligent quotient could be very high with individuals, but it is not necessary that it is used for positive purposes. There are enough examples where people who are physically fit but end up doing all the negative things, probably getting into various activities that are not appropriate for them. But the point here is, one has to understand that it is not enough to have high physical quotient or emotional quotient or intelligent quotient. It is important how you apply them. So there are negative aspects to it, and it is important to see how you can channelize that to positive aspects. And I believe power is in the balance. Now we all operate at various levels, and it is not that one level is superior to the other. It is the power, I think, is in the balance. So how you can ensure that all layers are equally fed, all layers are equally attended to, and maintain a level that would be appropriate for any given situation. So power is in the balance. And let me also slightly give you a different view. So in case, let's say you want to use this model for when you want to start a new organization or you want to start a new venture, it's my recommendation that you plan top down. So you start about what is your purpose of what you want to do? What does success look like? So is it going to be looking at profits, as I said, or is it going to be, yes, I want to use this as a vehicle to contribute? So start looking at top down. So what is that purpose? Then what is the intellectual quotient or intellectual type of people that I need to assemble together? What type of people I need to assemble together? How will they relate to each other? That becomes important. And to this purpose, what is the necessary foundation that I need to set in terms of finances, primarily finances, and other aspects of the physical layer? So this is what is important to plan and implement it, I would say, from the bottom. So start with the foundation and then get the right set of people with the right intelligence. I think that could be a careful handling that is required. You may not want to have very smart, intelligent guys, but they don't relate to everyone. So the situation should determine how you would want to look at this. But very important is people, when you select, it is important that they collaborate well with the other members of the organization. One individual brilliance is not going to help the eventual cause. It is like, again, quoting, you cannot have 11 MS Dhonis or 11 Tendulkars to win a match. It is not going to work. So it is important that we have the different skill set available, but most importantly, let's look at how they can collaborate. And I think this is my opinion, higher layers require stabilized lower layers. I think this is a very fundamental requirement. So you cannot push yourself to the higher layer without having the lower layer stabilized. So obviously it's all our basic common sense, but I think that's something that we may tend to forget in certain situations. So this is what we have, and next comes to the sustainability. Now, as we said, sustainability is how we do things now without impacting the future. Now, I think it is possible only these 4 stakeholders, which is the organization, finally it is all people within these various organizations. It is important for them to operate at higher layers to be able to have this sustainability happening. So if you have to be sustainable, people have to be fair, people have to respect everyone's interest. And if people generally operate at that higher layer, I'm sure sustainability is something that would be happening. I don't want to talk sustainability as a big subject, but in my opinion, with this model that we have put together, we believe that sustainability can be best achieved if people operate at higher layers. So, and for which obviously they have to take care of the lower layers. So that's essentially what it is. So finally, I think I'm coming to the end of my presentation. In the long run, it is my humble submission, a cultivation culture will win. And it is, I think it's commonsensical, I would suppose. I think most of you would probably relate to this. And we have to invest in this. We have to commit to this cause of developing people and not get sidestepped into other aspects that may sort of deviate from the original purpose. So that's what I thought I will share. I hope that is the time that was allotted to me is consumed, but I was just one slide and that's it from me. So I was a bit worried whether I would be able to talk enough. So over to you, Nair.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. So you have lived up to your reputation as a man who is a crux and core man, a man of few words, but whatever you say carries enough and more of weightage as well as enough and more of essence inside that. And even in your presentation, you had achieved that actually. Just one presentation, a typical Excel-like presentation, you have been able to bring in the whole sustainability aspect and bringing individuals and or sustaining the organization and bringing a cultivation culture within the organization. Okay. And what have you done? You have started with the corporate materialism and you combined it with the individual and societal spirituality. Actually, I mean, the whole thing has been incorporated. Okay. So I liked when you said that actually you plan top down, but actually implement it bottom up. I think that is something that people really fail to understand, and everything goes for a spin, and then lands up in major problem. I will be engaging you with some of the questions now. I shall also be expecting some of the questions to come from people in the chat mode. I have not been able to receive any so far. I will see whether people send in your questions. So in the meanwhile, let me engage you with some of the questions. And Matthew, as usual, I mean, as I said, everything in Malayalam we call, you have എല്ലാം കൂടി കുറുക്കി എടുത്ത് കറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഒരു സ്ലൈഡിൽ ഇട്ടിട്ട് മാത്യു കൊണ്ടുവന്ന് 35 minutes presentation കഴിഞ്ഞു. Okay, great. That is the way you have been, and that's the way you are. And it is quite unlike people like me who actually put in a lot of gas trying to speak a lot of words. Actually, you use very limited words. Thank you very much. Okay, now there are some elements to it. Now, see, you said about the contribution of the employees when you came to the employee side of it actually. And you have been employed. I mean, we have seen, how employment or employment contracts, permanent, contractual, temporary, etc., has been working in organizations. In the past, even during our times, mostly we were all sort of a monogamic structure where we'll work with an organization, end with an organization at some positions. Now we are seeing actually the millennials, and we are going to the gig economy, and people doing freelancing, doing multiple jobs at the same time. People not interested in the PF, ESI sort of a culture, people not wanting to bind themselves up to organizations, etc. Okay. So the contribution of the employee, therefore, hasn't it come down, Matthew? Like somebody who is long-term committed to your organization, vis-a-vis somebody who is a millennial who comes and does some part of it and goes away, either as a contract employee or even a short duration employee on a permanent basis. So how does this affect us? What is your take on this happening on the millennials, Matthew? Will you be able to answer that?
So this is the gig economy that is evolving. I think people are having skill sets. They are wanting to spend their life the way they want it. I think their experience is yet to come. And they will obviously over time realize that I think the purpose of life is a lot more and than just contributing their intelligence to several organizations. So, but my take is from your organization point of view, it's a very professional relationship. I mean, you have given a task to them, they complete that task. If you're happy with that, pay them, that's it. So there is nothing else that you would need to worry about. But what is going to happen with more such people evolving as we move forward is definitely something that we'll have to wait and see, SR, because today we have seen very few, at least in India. I think we have all seen people coming from traditional. Earlier in those days, people were only wanting government jobs, right? And yes, today people we are okay with corporate, private organizations, but the situation now is the gig economy is settling in where people, I mean, they just don't care. They are not wanting a job security as such. So, I mean, I think I don't have a straight answer as to what will happen, but from an organization perspective, I think we should look at them as a professional and give them the task, get the work done and move on, and be more focused on the people who are part of your organization. So that is one. And how they would evolve would have to happen with that experience. So, I mean, that's something that they will, I mean, hopefully over the next decade or so, we'll have some more clarity on how that industry is going to evolve.
I believe so, because, if you really want to define culture, which is long-term and evolving, you understand, culture is always considered to be long-term and evolving. Whereas if you really look at gig economy, contractual employment, multiple, freelancing, etc., is itsy bitsy. It is time duration, itsy bitsy. So now, how does this long evolving culture accommodate this itsy bitsy way of employment? This thing is something which is, as you rightly said, we have to see it emerging. Actually.
Yeah. So what's happening is, see, again, let me take a step back. So when I said yoga, yoga is primarily for individuals. Okay, so if you look at it, what it says is that if you intensely pursue any of the yogic practices, you will be able to achieve your objective. That's what yoga says.
Yes.
Now here we are having a situation where these individuals are individuals. I mean, they are not part of any organization. They want to continue to remain as individuals.
Yes.
So they will. I'm sure, given their skill set, given their ability to relate to various aspects of their life, and if they pursue whatever they are good at, I mean, it is possible that they also will have the whatever objectives they have set for themselves in their lives. Now, they will obviously, at some stage in their life, will start having families. They will start having other members who will become a sort of a family organizations, and that's when I think these type of situations will emerge. They cannot survive on their competence alone. They'll have to start understanding that collaboration is required to relate to all the members of their family, and to sustain this, I think their foundation has to be strong. So I think this has a very strong role there. And eventually, if they start understanding the contribution aspect to the whole thing, I think it is something that they would also believe that unless you cultivate and contribute to everyone, their long-term sustenance would be in question.
The long-term sustenance and long-term culture, etc., as you rightly mentioned in your slide, is ultimately reaching the purpose in life and the meaning in life. Okay, but with the millennials being what it is, as you rightly said, okay, eventually they have to understand or they have to realize their purpose and meaning in life. Okay, let me go to the second element of it. You have mentioned about customer experience. You started that layer by saying that cost and price is very, very critical to customer. Then you went into the experiential aspect. Actually, customer experience. Now we are told that customer is a king and delight him, this and that and all. That is exactly what is going on. Okay, and therefore companies and organizations and commercial setups, they always try to build up something called USP, unique selling proposition. Look at the way that I was actually talking to yesterday, Mr. P.H. Kurian, on something totally different. And we are saying that 2.5 crores of Malayalis here, our consumerism has actually in the last 30 years gone up to about 30 times. In terms of consuming clothes, in terms of consuming gold, consuming things and things like that. Okay. So every commercial organization is into USPs. And the earth is shattered, the climate is shattered, your solid waste is, all over the place, wallowing dirt, etc., etc., etc. Now, see, customer experience, giving customer experience with this so-called USPs, okay, leading to consumerism. Don't you think it is time that we come to something called a unique ecological protection proposition?
Possibly, yes, I would definitely agree. But here, when you talk a unique selling proposition, it is what you want to sell to the customer. That's an intent difference, in my opinion. Your intent is to sell your product.
Yeah.
Or is the intent to solve a customer's problem? I think that's something that needs to be differentiated. So it all depends on how the people are coached. If you are coaching them to project your value without realizing how it is going to benefit the end customer is a suspect. That approach is something that needs to be looked at. So
but within the age of this internet and connectivity and social media and all, people are trying to keep up with the Joneses, and then you see the consumerism is growing multifold. So it is not that companies are trying to solve a customer problem. It is that companies are actually trying to increase the behavioral aspect of the customers.
Yeah, so that's the result we got.
Yeah.
So when your intent is something else, you get the result that is going to be damaging. You are talking of all these overloads that have happened. So that's my view. So I think what is important is when you market something, I mean, look at you. It is also important that you have a sustainability view to what you are doing and not look at only your business and profit. So if the same organization is having a strong opinion about sustainability and they operate at that spiritual SQ layer, I'm sure their marketing, their approach would be different, or they would also have mechanisms to support these type of situations. For example, we have this thing about e-waste. I mean, I think a lot of talk and a lot of discussions are happening with so much of electronics that is doing its rounds now. Yes. E-waste is a big concern.
Indeed.
So instead of just, I mean, if you look at any of these big organizations, I mean, they have a very solid, very important e-waste policy. And I think the government is also mandating them to ensure that they have a solid e-waste policy in place and actually contribute. So this is a very significant sustainability initiative.
Yes.
I mean, it should not be forced, in my opinion, by the government norms, but it should be driven by the organization's own interests. I think that
is organization at the spiritual level. But today, in this age of guerrilla warfare and the post-truth age, do you think that companies are reaching that SQ age?
I think not. But I think it is important that we should have, at least as senior members leading various organizations, have that commitment to at least what we do. And one can lead to another, and this can hopefully cascade into something good for the environment.
Yeah. Another question that I have is you have very nicely and conveniently morphed the sports into competition, and you said that you have to be fair there and you have put the 4 layers there. See, if you really look at management from a long time, management has actually taken after the wars, and everything that we discuss in management is war, conquer, this, that. Market is a war front. You know, that is what we actually keep going on. So from a war front, or from when management of war, you have got to management of sports. So competition, now you're equating with sports vis-a-vis every organization says competition is war. So what is your take on this? How did you arrive at this competition being sports than war?
I think good question. So I think it is important to enjoy what you're doing, right? Yeah. So it is not appropriate. I mean, you have seen world wars. I think now that you have mentioned war, I think Hitler is a classic example of having very good PQ, very good EQ, very good IQ, but very bad SQ. You know?
Yeah.
So he is a person who had all these qualities, the 3 qualities that were below, but a very different perspective. Of course, there are different opinions on this, but at the end of the destruction that was happened in World War II was because of the SQ layer not being inconsistent with what is appropriate. Yes. So the reason why a sports was brought in there was to also convey life is also a game. Businesses also should be viewed as a game. There is no point in taking this like a war. Enjoy the game. One person wins, the other day you win, and you have to just cultivate your fitness. You have to cultivate your team in a passionate manner. You have to cultivate your competence, and you will obviously, that process of doing this will result in a win, but without hurting the sentiments of others. I think that's what I think that metaphor helps in understanding. I think thank you for bringing this up, because
but that means, Matthew, almost all the books that was written about marketing and management in the past has to be now done away with and burned, and we should start writing all over sports.
This is my opinion. This is my experience. I had given a disclaimer at that point in time. I strongly believe in that, because it doesn't help fighting each other. I mean, tomorrow you have to anyway face him in some other thing. So I think if you can actually have a pleasant experience, play it like a game. You win one game, your competition wins another. The best person who's prepared for the game actually wins. So that's the learning, and that's the way, I think that's the way we should look at it. That's the spirit of the whole, what you do in life.
I think I like it, Matthew. If there is one big takeaway from the whole presentation today, I would rather, maybe I also request the people in the audience also to consider that management and marketing and things, functions are not war, but it is sports. So today you win, tomorrow you may lose, and your consistency and fitness, etc. matters. Now, you have actually finally arrived at the cultivation culture. Okay. Typically, if you say cultivation in Hindi, in Malayalam, we'll call it as krishi. agriculture, krishi, which is a little different from the cultivation culture that actually you had built it up. And you also said in the evaluation column about relationship and service, relationship and service combining together. Now, how, in your opinion, that you have seen enough of companies all across the country and the world, and you also studied many of them together. So how many of the organizations, maybe Tata's or maybe some of the organization must have brought the whole overall organization into a sustainable cultivation culture, but what percentage of companies in the country and the world have actually brought up the organization and its people to cultivation culture, Matthew?
I think the way to look at that, SR, would be to see, study successful organizations and study organizations that have not succeeded. I think I think you will see a lot of learning, lot of insights. It is my opinion that successful organization will have to have these fundamentals in place. I mean, it has to be true. It cannot be a pseudo type of thing, because then it will obviously collapse soon. So if organizations have this fundamentals right and they are actually walking the talk and practicing what is necessary, I'm sure there is no reason for them to fail. I mean, they will continue to succeed, is my opinion.
Right, Matthew. I'm going to ask you my last question. I have not been able to get any questions from the chat. Yeah, there is one question which has come. Okay, the question from Mohammed Firoz to everyone. Everything included in one slide, including sports. Well done. Oh, acha, he's appreciated your this thing, Mohammed. Okay, beautiful. Now let me ask you my question.
No, there is a question, Nair. There is a question.
Oh, let me see. I have oh yes. Okay. Mohammed Firoz. Okay, fine. Well done, appreciated. Question: inclusiveness decreasing in the macro level these days more, and compartmentalization unfortunately is increasing. How do we make our macro level more inclusive, contributing, collaborative, and harmonious? It's a question from Mohammed Firoz.
That requires I think it requires a multi-dimensional thinking.
Yeah.
I think what is important is education at a fundamental level should also talk about certain aspects that are necessary for the future's benefit. Now, as senior people, we have lived through all these things. We have fought wars, we have learned, we have experienced, and we have come to a stage where these things make sense to us, right? So I think if this has to be more harmonious, I think one has to start at the grassroots level. One has to be able to put this thought into the younger generation, make them understand. Because and I think, let me also tell you one more thing here. The framework is good from a theory perspective, but implementing it is not so. And you can actually see it in several situations. Many organizations have similar or if not better technology, but they have failed in execution. Okay, so we have seen the Ubers and the Olas of the world in India. Ola took over Uber because their execution was bad. It is not that Uber didn't have the technology, or in fact they would have been better. But of course now they are catching up. But these are the two names that we know. But there are several other companies who have similar or better solutions, but they were not able to execute it. So there's a big difference in having the knowledge and actually practically implementing it. Yeah. So I would say that could be an area that also needs to be looked at. So one is education itself. The second thing is the execution. I think these two will probably have to be considered very seriously in executing this in a manner that
I would, Matthew, therefore call it as execution intelligence.
Yeah.
Intelligence to execute. I'll add one more dimension to your intelligence. So
I'm sure that, this is a journey, sir, because I think what has happened is something that has evolved over time. I'm sure with more discussions, more interactions, this can only grow. That's my opinion. I'm sure I will have a different version sometime soon. So that's
version 1.2 or version 2.0. Okay, we'll see. Yeah, my last question to you before I hand you over back to my president is that now precision. I have seen precision over the last 25-26 years growing into multi-dimensional organization, multiple services, multiple products, and some of the biggest IPs that you have created, and you're surviving with that. Now, all that you have created, you said it is experiential learning. To what extent have you been able to implement in your own corporation, man?
Yeah, that's where I think I probably answered some of it in the earlier response.
Yeah.
So this theoretical knowledge has come out of various experiences. Practical implementation is still an ongoing exercise. Now, there are difficulties, there are different points of view that come from my colleagues, but it is important that at some stage this framework would resonate with everyone. I would say that majority of the team is able to comprehend and relate to this, the importance of all these layers and how it is important. Now, I must tell you that, I mean, just a quick brief, I'm not wanting to talk more about precision here, but we have gone through 3 versions and we are now in our business version 4. And for us, version 2 was disaster, right? So we went through a really tough phase that was between 2007 to 2013. And we ended up making a lot of mistakes. And the correction phase, which happened from 2013, took us about 4-5 years. And that's how long it took. I mean, we took some tough decision to exit certain businesses. And the growth phase is again now, after having gone through all these things. So we did make our mistakes. We realized, and this, in fact, this learning has come because of those mistakes, I would say. I mean, I would not recommend others to go through these mistakes, obviously, because the learning is something that hopefully is implemented from the experiences of us. And this growth phase is where we are consciously trying to implement these learnings. And this framework that way helps in terms of understanding situations. I think I did explain one situation where we get to a meeting and each person operates at different levels. One person is emotional, another person is operational. I mean, or is at the talking about when we are discussing something very important or tactical or strategic. Now, this happens. So how you sort of navigate the whole thing, how you nudge that discussion to this thing itself is a big learning in that sense. So if this gets experienced and practicalized, then I'm sure the results would be a lot better in terms of savings in time, in terms of go-to-market action with customers. That's I mean, I think Toyota's way of reducing waste would be achieved if this type of models are understood by everyone and quickly they do that. And I think the productivity would go leaps and bounds. And more importantly, I think people would start appreciating the importance of their contribution, which has to be keeping the sustainability in mind. I think that responsibility also gets to these every individual. So that's hopefully it would happen sometime soon. I mean, I would say not at this moment, but sometime soon is something that probably will happen.
Yes, Matthew, on that hopes and aspiration, we'll conclude the discussion. It has been our pleasure and delight to host you, Matthew. I mean, and really enjoyed interacting with you. Thank you very much for your time. I would now hand you back to our President, Madhav Chandran. Madhav.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matthew and Mr. Sar Nair. That was indeed a very candid, dialogue, I would say. The first one slide, I wouldn't call it a slide presentation, just the one slide with all those points which were there for you to explain. I mean, it was like, reading your hand and saying that, predicting something. So it was on your hand, actually. The lines on your hand is what you showed there in the slide itself. Wonderful presentation. And I'm sure those who are present here must have really got a lot of insights into your experience and the kind of learnings which you have. The way in which you define the business as a purpose to create a vehicle to give more to all the stakeholders. And of course, with Kerala, going through all kinds of tragedies, be it the floods or even now the COVID, I'm sure, people must definitely, they will realize, that it's better to have a healthy playground or a sporting ground, like what you said, as in sports, for competition rather than having a war-like situation, like what SR said, So here, I'm sure we can relate to that, because we need to have that healthy coexistence, for those who are fit and healthy, let them win. That's underlying point, because you have to be healthy and fit to actually win, but then it's fine, rather than having a fierce competition to kill someone, there is no point, you don't know what the breath is going to be like tomorrow morning. So anyway, good. In that sense, you very clearly and in a simple manner defined sustainability without getting into the real theoretical aspects of that. As you said, you don't want to get into that, you said, but then you very well explained that. Thank you so much for that lucid presentation, and of course the discussion which you had with SR later on. Before I hand you over to my joint secretary for the formal vote of thanks, let me make a couple of announcements here to our delegates present here. We will have a StartCon session this month soon, and also an MSME workshop focusing on the need to embrace technological advances coming up soon, in this month itself. Please keep watching the messages from KMA to know more details about the same. But we have very timely panel discussion already lined up for the 27th of January with a contemporary topic, Kerala's developmental conundrum. Notwithstanding whoever is governing our state, our program committee chair says, any news of development, especially to do with infrastructure front, is anathema to everyone except the ruling front of that time. That's what is happening in Kerala now. This has been going on for decades, be it on infrastructure or on governance. The objective of this panel discussion, which we are going to have, is to find a way to go forward, setting aside the criticisms and looking at things from a very positive perspective. We already have former ambassador Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, former chairman of HUDCO and founding chair of Forums for Critical Utility Services, a nationwide NGO, Mr. V. Suresh, and executive chair of IBS, vociferous proponent of development in Kerala, Mr. V.K. Matthews, confirming as panelist. And we may get one more renowned person of relevance to share his thoughts as well. And this panel session will be moderated by our own past president, Mr. S.R. Nair, which will be on 27th January at 6 p.m. So please mark that day, 27th January, for this contemporary topical panel discussion. So please stay tuned to our announcements and notices on WhatsApp, SMS, email for more details on these events and more. And now it's time for our Joint Secretary, Mr. Algiers Khalid, a businessman from a family line who is into all kinds of fields from shipping to garments. Mr. Algiers, to propose the vote of thanks.
President R. Madhav Chandran, our invited speaker of the day, Mr. Matthew Chacko, co-founder, director, and CEO of Precision Informatics India Limited, program coordinator, past president S.R. Nair, galaxy of past presidents of KMA, managing committee, and KMA members. Thank you, Mr. Matthew Chacko, for sparing your valuable time to be here today at KMA and for sharing thoughts on creating a sustainable corporate culture and new paradigm. The culture framework you shared based on your experience and journey was very enlightening, especially from the perspective of any stakeholder in a sustainable corporate to cultivate and develop people as required from bottom up. Connecting stakeholders with different layers of Quotient and then its effect on human system and its layers, and finally to action, interaction, evaluation, possible challenges. Indeed, an eye-opener on how we should understand culture of a sustainable corporate and even how to develop the required culture in an organization. Wonderful presentation in a single stride. I'm sure everyone thoroughly enjoyed the session. Thank you, Mr. Matthew Chacko.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the time.
Today's talk was yet another excellent session in KMA's LeaderTalks series, where all members get opportunity to listen to leaders in different spheres of life on speakers' valuable experience. As President mentioned in his introductory remark, today's session is the 21st in the LeaderTalk, started this year under the leadership of past President S.R. Nair. We highly appreciate and are thankful to the moderator of the session, our own past President and Program Committee Chair, S.R. Nair. Thank you, past President S.R. Nair, for conceiving LeaderTalk series and arranging industry leaders to talk about current, interesting, and very relevant topics. In fact, LeaderTalk session has become an event which everyone in KMA eagerly look forward to. Thank you, SR. Thanks to all the past presidents, managing committee, and K members for attending today's session. We had a reasonably good attendance throughout the talk, in spite of the scare of Omicron and a surge in positive numbers. I would also like to place on record and thank the KMA Secretary team, led by our Executive Director, Lieutenant Jojo Jacob, and his team members, Prajit and Padma Kumar. Thank you all. Also, thanks to our program sponsors, Medivision, Hale, Sira, and Varma Homes. They all play a very important role in the success of all programs of KMA. Before I conclude, I request President to hand over the specially curated memento to the speaker for him to remember the talk today at KMA and cherish it lifelong.
Matthew, this is a physical one. This is not a virtual one. This will reach you very soon. This is your photograph. Your photograph during the session, so that you will remember that one day you were here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.
We have.
Thank you, one and all. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Algiers, and thank you all once again. Let's look forward to the next event, but at the same time, let's stay safe. Let's enjoy the Magar Sankranti and Pongal and all the festivals over the weekend peacefully.
Happy Pongal.
Be safe, and take care. All the best. And that's